They said the stars were unreachable. Humanity had always looked up with longing, but for centuries, it had remained trapped beneath the sky, bound to the soil and the limits of its own fragile world. And yet, Earth was dying. Slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, then with a force that could no longer be ignored. Oceans boiled under the heat of a changing sun. Storms raged with fury unseen in generations. Forests turned to ash, and skies grew heavy with choking smoke. The cradle of human civilization was crumbling, and there was no safety left beneath its fading light. In the midst of despair, hope took root. Scientists, dreamers, and visionaries, those who refused to accept the end, came together. They built what the world called the Starwood Initiative, a single, desperate plan to carry humanity beyond the reach of its dying planet. 50 souls, one ship, and a dream older than humanity itself. They would cross the void, leaving everything familiar behind, to search for life among the stars, to find proof that humanity was not alone. Among them was Dr. Elara Myles. She had spent her life staring at the heavens, tracing patterns in the constellations, listening for signals no one else could hear. The stars spoke to her in whispers she could not ignore. She carried the weight of the impossible on her shoulders, knowing that failure meant extinction, not just for her, but for everyone she loved. And so, as the engines of the ship roared to life, as the countdown echoed in every corner of the planet, humanity held its breath. They were about to leave everything behind, the world that had shaped them, the people they had loved, the lives they had known. The journey would not be simple. The stars do not yield their secrets easily. And yet, humanity had never understood the meaning of surrender. The void awaited. And within it, perhaps, life waited too. Humanity had always believed in its resilience. Wars had been fought, diseases conquered, empires risen and fallen. But nothing had prepared them for the slow, inevitable unraveling of the world they called home. The signs had been there for generations, whispered warnings ignored in favor of convenience and comfort. Rivers that had once flowed clear now carried poison in their currents. Forests that had stretched across continents were reduced to brittle, lifeless skeletons. Cities groaned under the weight of millions, and beneath the noise, the earth itself trembled as if warning its inhabitants that it could bear no more. And yet, for all the destruction, humanity hesitated. For centuries, they had looked to the stars as a dream, not a destination. Colonies on the moon, stations orbiting Mars, probes sent to distant planets, all experiments in curiosity, in preparation, but none a real lifeline. Every plan had been theoretical, cautious. The idea of leaving Earth permanently was dismissed as fantasy, even lunacy. There was comfort in denial, and denial was easier than action. But denial became impossible when the evidence could no longer be ignored. Ocean temperatures reached breaking points, unleashing storms that could swallow entire coastlines. Crops failed year after year. Famine spread like wildfire, and with it came the chaos of desperation, wars over dwindling resources, civil unrest, governments crumbling under the pressure of millions desperate to survive. Humanity had no margin left for error. The planet systems, the delicate balances that had sustained life for millennia, were collapsing all at once. It was in this moment of utter reckoning that the Starwood Initiative was conceived. Scientists, engineers, politicians, and visionaries worked feverishly, driven not by ambition or curiosity alone, but by the terrifying knowledge that if they failed, there would be no second chance. Humanity had a choice: fight to survive on a planet that was dying, or risk everything on a voyage into the unknown. And the risk was staggering. No human had ever traveled beyond the safety of the solar system. No one could guarantee what awaited in the void between stars. The distances were incomprehensible, measured in years, decades, centuries. A journey to even the nearest potentially habitable planet would test the limits of human endurance, technology, and resolve. Ships would need to carry not just life support, but hope, the fragile thread that could bind 50 people together across the void of light years. Yet, there was no alternative. Returning to the familiar meant certain death. Remaining on Earth was to accept extinction, to watch the last breath of humanity escape into smoke and ash. And so, against all fear and doubt, the decision was made. A ship would leave. Humans would pierce the void. And humanity's destiny, long confined to one dying planet, would finally extend to the stars. Even as the decision was made, it became clear how fragile the undertaking would be. Entire generations would live and die knowing that their survival depended on a few brave souls chosen to take the first leap. Political factions clashed, corporations jockeyed for control of resources, and public faith wavered. Some hailed the initiative as salvation, the final chance to redeem humanity's mistakes. Others denounced it as reckless hubris, a fool's errand that would squander precious lives on dreams that could never be realized. Amid this turmoil, the scientists and engineers labored with obsessive precision. Every system was tested, every algorithm run through simulations millions of times. The crew had to be trained to withstand not just the isolation of space, but the psychological strain of seeing time itself bend across the void. Days would stretch into weeks, months, perhaps even years from their perspective. Communication with Earth would be delayed by distances that made conversation almost meaningless. The humans who embarked on this journey would be pioneers, explorers, and martyrs in equal measure. And yet, despite the fear, there was a spark of hope. Humanity had always thrived on the impossible. It had built cities in deserts, sailed across oceans no map had charted, and reached peaks no climber had touched. If they could survive the chaos on their home planet, perhaps they could survive the silence of the stars. Perhaps they could endure what no human had endured before. Dr. Elara Myles understood the gravity of this truth better than most. She had watched her world crumble from laboratories and observation decks, tracking every disaster, every failing system. And yet, she also glimpsed the other possibility, the spark of life beyond Earth, waiting silently among the stars, patiently watching for those brave, or desperate, enough to seek it. Humanity's dilemma was stark, but clear: either confront the void, with all its uncertainty, or accept annihilation. There was no middle path. In the end, the Starwood Initiative was not just a plan. It was a statement of defiance. A promise that humanity would not surrender, even when the odds were insurmountable, even when the planet that had nurtured it could no longer sustain it. 50 souls would venture beyond the cradle of Earth. They would carry every hope, every fear, every memory of humanity into the darkness. And if they succeeded, the stars would no longer be distant lights in the sky, they would be the future. Humanity had no choice but to leap. And the void waited, patient and eternal, ready to reveal whether humans were worthy of life among the stars. Dr. Elara Myles had always been different. While the rest of humanity struggled to survive on a planet that was unraveling, she spent her nights staring at the stars, mapping their secrets, tracing their patterns, and listening for whispers in the void. Her fascination was not born of escapism or idle curiosity, it was born of necessity. To understand the universe was to understand survival itself, and she carried the weight of that truth like a quiet, unyielding flame. From a young age, Elara had been drawn to questions that others ignored. Why did certain stars blink as though alive? What did the faint, rhythmic signals in the cosmic background truly mean? Were they random, or was someone, or something, trying to communicate? Her childhood was spent in observatories, her eyes glued to telescopes that dwarfed her tiny frame, her nights filled with notebooks brimming with calculations, diagrams, and half-formed theories. Her father had once told her, some people are born to look at the world as it is. Others, like you, are born to look beyond it. She had taken those words as both a blessing and a burden. As she grew, Elara's brilliance became impossible to ignore. She earned accolades for her work in astrophysics, for her uncanny ability to detect anomalies in starlight and patterns that others dismissed as noise. Yet, despite the recognition, she remained restless. Earth, with its crumbling cities and dying oceans, felt suffocating to her, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. She could see the planet's decline with every rising tide, every wildfire, every collapse of infrastructure, and the knowledge that the world might not survive long enough to see her discoveries come to fruition gnawed at her relentlessly. When the Starwood Initiative was announced, Elara's moment had arrived. She was chosen not only for her expertise, but for her vision, her ability to dream beyond the constraints of gravity, of bureaucracy, of fear. She was to lead the scientific team aboard Aurora, the first human ship built to pierce the void and search for life beyond the solar system. The responsibility was staggering. 50 souls would entrust their lives, and perhaps the future of humanity itself, to her judgment. Every calculation, every decision, would carry unimaginable weight. One mistake could cost lives, one misstep could doom humanity's first venture into the stars. But for Elara, it was never about fear. It was about purpose. Each night, as she reviewed charts and simulations, she felt the pulse of the universe beneath her fingers, as if the stars themselves were guiding her. She imagined the worlds waiting to be discovered, the forms of life unseen, the civilizations that may have existed long before humans ever looked up. She wondered what it would mean to find a planet alive with motion, with thought, with intelligence. Would they welcome humanity? Would they even notice? Could humans survive the truths they might uncover? Elara was acutely aware that this journey would change her irrevocably. There would be long stretches of isolation, moments where the vast emptiness of space would feel like a weight pressing against the chest, where the silence between stars could drive even the strongest mind to the brink of madness. But she accepted this, not as a challenge, but as a necessary step. Humanity had no future on Earth, the only path forward was into the unknown. And someone had to lead the way. Her colleagues often remarked on the quiet intensity in her eyes, the way she could see both the impossibility of the mission and the necessity of it at the same time. They did not always understand her obsession, nor the strange serenity she carried, knowing that her mind was always half focused on calculations, half focused on dreams of alien skies. But she welcomed the solitude, for in the stillness, she could hear the universe speak, its language of light, of gravity, of time itself. Elara Myles was not just a scientist. She was a pioneer, a dreamer, a sentinel standing on the threshold of humanity's greatest leap. And as the engines of Aurora prepared to ignite, as Earth's last whispers faded behind them, she felt the weight of history settle on her shoulders, and the exhilaration of discovery pulse through her veins. The stars were waiting, and she would be the first to answer their call. The world had grown silent, waiting. The chaos of failing cities, the cries of famine, the endless news of disasters, all seemed to fade when the eyes of humanity turned to the launch pad. On the outskirts of the last habitable zones, nestled in a desert that still held some semblance of Earth's raw beauty, the Aurora rested. Towering and gleaming, it was both a monument and a promise. 50 souls, the first humans to truly leave their cradle, would soon step aboard and carry the weight of humanity into the void. Dr. Elara Myles stood among them, her gaze steady on the ship. She had walked these decks countless times, studied the calculations for every possible scenario, prepared for every contingency. And yet, as the countdown approached, a flicker of unease passed through her mind. She could feel the immense scale of what they were about to do, the impossibility, the sheer audacity of it. The aurora was humanity's defiance, a declaration to the cosmos that Earth would not fade silently into oblivion. The crew gathered in the staging area, a collection of the brightest minds, the most resilient bodies, the most disciplined minds of a species on the edge of extinction. Each of them carried their own fears and dreams, their own reasons for being here. Some were scientists, some engineers, some pilots who had spent years in isolation simulations, their minds sharpened from months of travel in the emptiness of space. All had been chosen not just for skill, but for endurance, the mental and emotional resilience required to traverse light years in a single human lifetime. Elara moved among them quietly, offering small words of encouragement, nods, and reassurances. She could sense the nervous tension, the doubts creeping into hearts, the same doubts that would strike her own mind if she allowed herself to dwell. She did not dwell. She focused. The calculations had been triple-checked, simulations had run millions of times, the physics was sound. The unknown could not be ignored, but it could be respected, studied, prepared for. They had done all they could, and now, the universe would test them. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. The voices of mission control echoed through the comms, steady and mechanical. 7, 6, 5. Every second stretched, heavy with expectation. The desert air vibrated with anticipation, the heat of the day fading into a charged stillness. 4, 3, 2. The engines rumbled, a low, powerful vibration that resonated through the bones of those waiting to depart. 1. Ignition. The aurora lifted, slowly at first, as if testing the courage of those aboard. Then faster, surging into the sky, leaving behind the last remnants of Earth beneath its engines. The roar of machinery became a hum, and in moments, the ship was above the clouds, piercing the thin atmosphere that had contained humanity for millennia. Below, Earth receded, a mosaic of greens, browns, and blues fading into distance. Above, the stars stretched infinitely, silent, patient, waiting. Inside the vessel, the crew felt the first real taste of the void. Gravity shifted, bodies pressed against restraints, hearts raced with adrenaline and fear. Systems hummed, lights blinked in rhythmic patterns. Every module of the aurora worked in precise harmony, yet the emptiness beyond the reinforced hull was a reminder of how alone they were, how fragile. Elara strapped herself into the command station, her hands moving instinctively over controls, monitors, and data feeds. She observed the trajectory, watched the readings, felt the vibrations of the ship as if it were alive. The calculations were perfect, yet a human mind is never truly satisfied with perfection. The unknown remained, a dark, silent presence pressing against consciousness. Hours passed in a blur. The Earth grew smaller, a pale blue dot that had once seemed infinite. Radio communications with mission control became delayed, fragmented by distance. The crew began adjusting to the weightlessness, performing routine checks, calibrating instruments designed to detect life, energy signatures, and planetary anomalies. The initial awe of leaving Earth gave way to a growing awareness of isolation. In this moment, every sound, every movement, every flicker of light within the ship became amplified in importance. One mistake could be fatal. One oversight could undo decades of preparation. Even in these early hours, subtle signs of the void began to manifest. Sensors detected faint anomalies in the surrounding space, unexplained energy fluctuations, faint electromagnetic pulses, patterns that could have been dismissed as noise but were recorded nonetheless. Elara noted them carefully, her mind cataloging possibilities, natural phenomena, cosmic radiation, or something else. Something unknown. She felt the familiar tingle of curiosity that had driven her since childhood, mixed with the awareness that curiosity in this place could be dangerous. By the second day, routines had formed. Meals, exercise, monitoring, and observation, the rhythm of life in a ship that carried the future of humanity. And yet, the silence of the void was never broken. It stretched infinitely, indifferent to the presence of humans or their ambitions. The stars remained distant, unblinking witnesses to the fragile lives aboard the Aurora. Elara allowed herself a private thought, spoken only in the quiet of her mind: we are here, on the edge of everything. We are the first to leave the cradle of Earth, and we carry all its memories, all its failures, all its hope. The void waits, patient and eternal. And we will see if we are worthy of it. The launch had succeeded. The impossible had been achieved. Humanity had stepped into the void for the first time. And in that step, every soul aboard the Aurora understood a truth they could not yet fully comprehend: the journey was only beginning. The engines of the Aurora had roared, leaving Earth behind. From the first moment the ship pierced the atmosphere, every person aboard felt the unshakable truth: there was no turning back. The familiar pull of gravity loosened, replaced by weightlessness, a strange freedom that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The stars stretched endlessly outside the reinforced hull, unblinking witnesses to humanity's most daring endeavor. Dr. Elara Myles remained at the command station, her hands moving with practiced precision over controls and instruments. She monitored trajectory, energy outputs, life support systems, and navigational readings simultaneously, each one demanding complete attention. Despite the calmness she projected to the crew, her mind raced with calculations, possibilities, and contingencies. Every second mattered. Every decision carried the weight of 50 lives and the hope of an entire species. The first few hours were a delicate dance of systems checks and minor adjustments. The Aurora's engines burned steadily, propelling them faster than any human had ever traveled. Lights blinked rhythmically, computers hummed with activity, and the soft metallic groans of the ship settling into the stress of interstellar travel became almost hypnotic. For the crew, the initial awe of leaving Earth gave way to the quiet realization that they were alone, truly alone, in a sea of infinite darkness. Conversations between crew members were careful, measured. Some spoke of wonder, of the breathtaking view of Earth shrinking below them. Others remained silent, staring at their instruments, lost in thought. Many had trained for isolation, but even simulations could not fully prepare them for the emotional weight of leaving their world forever. A few glanced at the thick hull and whispered quietly, half in fear, half in reverence, "We are the first." Elara moved quietly among them during these early hours, checking on each station, observing reactions, answering questions with calm certainty. She noticed subtle tremors in hands that weren't used to weightlessness, tiny hesitations in speech, the way some eyes lingered on distant stars as if hoping for a signal. It was natural. Fear and wonder were inseparable companions in this journey. And yet, she reminded herself, they had prepared for this moment, trained relentlessly, and endured simulations far harsher than reality could ever be. The journey beyond Earth introduced phenomena they had never experienced firsthand. Subtle vibrations rippled through the hull as the ship adjusted for speed, tiny fluctuations in energy readings flickered across monitors, and sensors detected minute distortions in gravitational fields nearby. These were expected, accounted for, manageable, but they reminded everyone aboard of the vast, incomprehensible scale of the void they had entered. The universe was not inert. It was alive in ways humans barely understood. Meals and routines were established quickly. Even in space, life demanded rhythm. Nutrient gels and synthetic proteins replaced the meals they once knew, but they were sustenance rather than pleasure. Exercise protocols were essential to maintain muscle mass and bone density in zero gravity. Every motion was deliberate, a constant negotiation with the strange absence of weight. During these hours, Elara observed the subtle dynamics forming among the crew. Bonds strengthened in shared tasks, whispered encouragements, quiet laughter breaking tension. Rivalries and insecurities remained, but under her watchful eye, discipline and unity were forged in the strange crucible of space. And then came the first real test of human perception in the void. As the aurora left the planetary system behind, the stars appeared sharper, colder, more numerous. At first glance, it seemed serene, infinite, and indifferent. But subtle anomalies began to appear on the edge of sensor readings, microscopic distortions, faint energy pulses, patterns too precise to be random. The crew debated their meaning. Were they natural cosmic phenomena, or something else entirely? The sensors were calibrated, the readings consistent. Elara recorded every anomaly meticulously, her curiosity igniting alongside a quiet, pressing unease. Days stretched into what felt like a liminal state. Time in the void was strange. Without familiar reference points, the rising and setting of the sun, the cadence of day and night, hours felt elastic. Sleep cycles were monitored carefully, though some crew members found themselves drifting into a quiet, disoriented haze between shifts. Dreams blended with reality. Memories of Earth surfaced unexpectedly, tugging at hearts that longed for what they had left behind. Others began to notice the quiet, a hum beyond the hum of machinery, a subtle vibration in the bones that could not be explained. The void had a presence, even if silent. Early conflicts emerged in subtle ways. Tensions over trivial tasks, disagreements on prioritizing data collection, and small errors in routine checks tested the cohesion of the crew. But under Elara's calm leadership, these tensions were managed. She reminded everyone that the stakes were too high for distraction or discord. The mission demanded focus, trust, and the ability to endure discomfort for long stretches. Survival in the void was as much psychological as it was physical. By the end of the first week, routines had solidified. Crew members were attuned to the hum of the ship, the patterns of monitors, the subtle rhythms of life in zero gravity. Communication with Earth was now delayed by minutes, a subtle but growing reminder of the distances they were crossing. The sense of detachment grew. The stars beyond the thick hull were no longer just points of light, they were markers of both opportunity and isolation, witnesses to humanity's first step into the cosmic unknown. Elara allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. She thought of the billions left behind on Earth, of the sacrifices that had enabled this journey, of the fragile thread connecting them to their home. And she thought of the possibilities waiting among the stars, planets teeming with life, intelligence of forms unimaginable, mysteries written in the language of physics and energy. The universe stretched infinitely, both a challenge and an invitation. It was in this quiet, weightless state that the aurora truly became a vessel of human ambition. 50 souls suspended in the void, carrying every hope, fear, and memory of Earth, moving beyond what was known. Each day, each observation, each calculated adjustment was a step further from the cradle that had nurtured them. They were explorers in the truest sense, venturing into darkness not for conquest, but for understanding. Elara watched the stars from her station, fingers tracing lines of data, and thought quietly to herself, "We have left Earth behind. We have entered the void. And now, we must see what waits for us among the stars." The journey had begun. Humanity's first real step into interstellar space was complete, and the true challenge, the search for life, for meaning, for survival, was only just beginning. The first few days beyond Earth had been a delicate balance of awe and discipline. The stars stretched infinitely in all directions, a vast canvas that both thrilled and intimidated. But soon, the exhilaration of leaving the cradle of humanity gave way to reality, the harsh truth of what it meant to live in the void. Mechanical systems, no matter how perfectly designed, demanded constant attention. The engines of the Aurora hummed steadily, but minor fluctuations in energy output began to appear on the monitors. At first, they were subtle, tiny blips in the sensor readings, easily dismissed as interference or minor calibration errors. But as hours passed, patterns emerged. The navigation systems required constant adjustment to compensate for unexpected gravitational anomalies from distant stars and rogue asteroids. Even the life support modules, the heart of survival on board, showed fluctuations in oxygen circulation and temperature control. Each alert, no matter how small, became a test of the crew's resolve. For the humans aboard, the psychological weight was just as formidable as the mechanical challenges. Weightlessness, once a novelty, became a constant reminder of vulnerability. Simple tasks, preparing food, moving through corridors, performing maintenance, required intense concentration. Sleep became fragmented, often interrupted by the hum of machinery or the faint, inexplicable vibrations transmitted through the hull. Dreams bled into waking thought. Memories of Earth, the laughter of friends, the warmth of sunlight, the smell of rain, surfaced unpredictably, tugging at minds already stretched thin. Tensions, inevitable in isolation, began to rise. Minor disagreements over procedural priorities became heated debates. Some crew members questioned whether every anomaly required attention, arguing that minor fluctuations were natural in deep space. Others insisted on vigilance, convinced that neglect, however small, could be fatal. The air of the ship, though filtered and recycled, felt heavier with anxiety. A sense of quiet urgency permeated every conversation, every glance, every pause. Elara observed it all with careful precision. Her own mind was divided between monitoring systems, logging data, and maintaining the cohesion of the crew. She spoke calmly, her voice measured and deliberate, guiding her team without letting fear infiltrate their confidence. She knew the importance of reassurance, of demonstrating competence and calm when the void offered neither. "We prepare for the expected," she said quietly during one of the briefings, "and we respond to the unexpected. That is the difference between survival and disaster." Even with preparation, the void offered surprises. A minor micrometeoroid strike rattled the hull one night, sending alarms across multiple stations. The impact was superficial, yet it served as a stark reminder: outside the protective shell of the Aurora, nothing was forgiving. Crew members rushed to assess the damage, their movements precise, their hands steady, yet beneath the efficiency lingered the shadow of fear. Every heartbeat became a reminder of the stakes, every decision a potential tipping point between life and death. The isolation also revealed subtler, psychological challenges. In zero gravity, with communication delays growing steadily as they moved further from Earth, a quiet paranoia crept into the minds of some. Shadows seemed to linger where none should, faint whispers, whether imagined or a product of sensory overload, echoed in moments of stillness. The emptiness outside became oppressive, a vast void pressing against human consciousness. And yet, amid these trials, moments of profound beauty emerged, a distant nebula casting ethereal light on the hull, the subtle dance of binary stars, the calm glow of a planet reflecting starlight. These glimpses reminded the crew why they had left Earth, why they endured discomfort and fear, to witness the universe as it truly was. Nutrition and physical health, often overlooked on Earth, became critical challenges in the void. Synthetic food sustained the body but lacked the satisfaction of real taste, leaving some restless and frustrated. Exercise protocols were relentless, designed to maintain muscle and bone strength in zero gravity, yet they left muscles aching in ways unfamiliar to human memory. Even the most disciplined crew struggled with fatigue, compounded by long shifts and constant vigilance. Communication with Earth, once a lifeline, was now a challenge of distance and delay. Messages took minutes, then hours, to traverse the growing gulf between home and ship. Answers arrived out of sequence, and time-sensitive decisions often fell solely on the judgment of the crew. The knowledge that they were both isolated and responsible, entirely self-reliant, weighed heavily on every decision, no matter how routine. By the end of the first week, the crew had begun to understand the reality of their mission. Space was not forgiving. The void was indifferent, vast, and patient. Each challenge, mechanical, psychological, physiological, was a test not just of skill but of endurance, discipline, and will. And through it all, Elara remained a steady presence, guiding, observing, and making decisions that could mean the difference between survival and catastrophe. The first challenges were not deadly, but they were clarifying. They revealed the fragility of human life, the ruthlessness of the void, and the relentless demand for focus and resilience. And as the aurora sailed deeper into the darkness between the stars, the crew came to a simple, immutable truth: surviving the first steps was only the beginning. The universe awaited, vast, mysterious, and unknowable, and it would soon demand more than skill or preparation, it would demand courage. The void, once a silent expanse, began to stir in ways the crew had never anticipated. Days into the journey, as the aurora glided past the outer reaches of the solar system, sensors picked up an anomaly. At first, it was subtle, a fluctuation in the electromagnetic field near a distant, dying star, barely noticeable amid the background cosmic noise. But the readings persisted, precise and repeated, impossible to ignore. Dr. Elara Myles was the first to notice it. At the command station, she stared at the monitor, analyzing the pattern. The anomaly was not random. It pulsed with a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. She leaned closer, running simulations, cross-referencing with every known natural phenomenon, stellar decay, magnetic storms, cosmic radiation, but nothing fit. The anomaly seemed deliberate. Ordered. Impossible by any conventional standard. "Commander," she said, voice low but steady, calling over the intercom. "You need to see this." The captain and several crew members gathered, eyes widening at the data streams. Graphs of the star's emissions twisted and pulsed in perfect repetition. Some curves formed shapes, geometric and precise, as if encoded with intent. There was no precedent for such a discovery. Even the most extreme stellar behavior could not account for it. Questions raced through the minds of the crew. Could it be a signal from another intelligence? Or was it some undiscovered phenomenon, a natural quirk of physics beyond their understanding? The uncertainty gripped them. Excitement warred with fear. A discovery like this could redefine humanity's understanding of the universe, or it could be a harbinger of danger they could not yet comprehend. The anomaly had effects beyond the instruments. Crew members began reporting strange sensations, fleeting chills, moments of dizziness, a sense that the room itself was subtly shifting. Some swore they heard faint whispers, unintelligible, almost as if the void itself was communicating. Others felt an inexplicable tension, a prickling awareness, as if the very atoms of the ship were vibrating in response to the anomaly. Elara maintained her composure, yet she could not deny a shiver of unease herself. The pattern was too precise, too deliberate, to be dismissed as coincidence. She ordered the crew to run extensive scans, to monitor every energy pulse, every electromagnetic signature, every gravitational fluctuation in the vicinity of the star. Yet no matter how detailed the measurements, the anomaly resisted full comprehension. It existed outside the parameters of human expectation, a cosmic puzzle that demanded attention. Hours stretched into days. The anomaly pulsed with unrelenting regularity, unaffected by the aurora's presence. Crew members began taking shifts to observe it directly, sometimes losing sleep to watch the rhythms on their monitors. Patterns seemed to shift subtly when unobserved, always remaining just beyond complete understanding. The star, dying by natural processes according to theory, seemed to emit a message through its light. A message no one yet had the key to decode. Tensions rose within the crew. Some argued they should continue the journey, dismissing the anomaly as curiosity. Others insisted on lingering, fearing they might miss something unprecedented. Minor disagreements became heated debates, underscoring the psychological strain of extended isolation and the weight of responsibility. Every crew member knew the implications. They were not just exploring the universe, they were interpreting signals that could alter the very foundation of human knowledge. One night, while observing the anomaly, Elara noticed a pattern emerging in the data. It was fractal, recursive, repeating at multiple scales, as if the universe itself was layered with hidden intelligence. She called the science team to her station, pointing to the graphs. "Look here," she said. "This isn't random energy. Someone, or something, is shaping it." Her words hung in the air like a bell in silence. The crew exchanged glances, the weight of the statement settling in. Humanity had left Earth seeking life among the stars, and here, perhaps, was the first evidence, not a creature, not a civilization, but an intelligence embedded in the very fabric of the cosmos. Yet alongside the wonder came fear. The universe was vast and indifferent, but this anomaly hinted at awareness. Awareness that did not belong to Earth, to humanity, to anything known. The implications were staggering. They could be witnessing a cosmic phenomenon entirely benign, or one that might not welcome observation. The anomaly affected the ship subtly. Instruments occasionally flickered, systems registering small, unexplained variances. Lights dimmed without cause. Crew members reported fleeting glimpses of movement at the edge of their vision, shadows that vanished when looked at directly. Sleep became restless, dreams invasive, filled with symbols they could not interpret. The void was no longer empty. It had begun to whisper, to challenge, to insinuate presence. Elara remained resolute. She insisted on caution and observation, meticulous documentation, and constant cross-referencing. She reminded the crew, curiosity was humanity's greatest strength, but arrogance in the void could be fatal. The anomaly was a mystery to be understood, not feared, but the tension was unavoidable. The unknown stretched beyond imagination, and every heartbeat aboard the Aurora carried the knowledge that they were part of something far larger than themselves. For the first time, the crew understood that the journey was no longer just a voyage through space, it was an encounter with the cosmos as a conscious entity. Whether the anomaly was life, intelligence, or something entirely beyond comprehension, it had revealed the first truth of interstellar exploration: humanity was not alone in witnessing the universe, and the universe, in some way, was watching back. As the Aurora adjusted course slightly to continue monitoring the star, Elara reflected quietly to herself, "This is why we came. To leave Earth behind, to see beyond ourselves. But the void does not reveal its secrets easily. And when it does, we may not be ready for what it asks of us." The first cosmic mystery had arrived. And with it, the crew of the Aurora had glimpsed the edge of knowledge, and the beginning of wonder, fear, and revelation that would define the rest of humanity's journey among the stars. Conflict emerged in subtle but dangerous ways. Arguments over procedural priorities escalated quickly. Some crew members questioned Elara's insistence on meticulous observation of the anomaly, fearing it distracted from the ship's trajectory or energy optimization. Others believed it was imperative to study the signals fully, convinced that any oversight could cost humanity a historic discovery. These debates were rarely shouted, but the tension was palpable, a current running through every conversation, every glance, every step in the corridors of the Aurora. Elara intervened with quiet authority, not to dominate, but to stabilize. She reminded the crew that the mission was bigger than personal opinions or fear. Every decision had consequences. Every choice mattered. Discipline, she emphasized, was survival. Trust was survival. And yet, she knew that trust was fragile when humans were pushed to their limits. Every shift, every observation, every exercise period was an experiment not just in physics or engineering, but in human endurance and cohesion. Even small moments of vulnerability revealed the human factor in stark relief. During one monitoring shift, a young engineer broke down silently, overwhelmed by the distance from Earth and the isolation of the ship. Elara sat with him, speaking quietly, acknowledging the fear without dismissing it. "You are not alone," she said. "We are 50 souls. 50 minds. Each of us carries the same weight. And together, we endure." The moment passed, but it lingered in her memory, a reminder that strength was not absence of fear, but the courage to confront it with others. The human factor extended beyond emotional resilience. Cognitive strain became apparent as the anomaly persisted. Observing patterns, tracking pulses, and recording data with meticulous precision required mental stamina. Fatigue and monotony threatened accuracy. Instruments were double-checked, calculations rerun, and yet subtle errors crept in, a reminder that even the brightest minds were fallible under extreme conditions. One miscalculation could lead to disaster, drifting off course, misinterpreting data, or worse, failing to detect a genuine threat. Moments of camaraderie, however, revealed the other side of the human factor. Shared awe at the stars, small rituals of humor, quiet conversations over nutrient gels, and collaborative problem-solving reinforced bonds that would be tested again and again. Laughter in the corridors, rare as it was, became a powerful counterbalance to the weight of isolation and fear. Humanity, fragile and fallible, yet resilient, revealed itself in these small but profound acts. Elara herself was not immune. She felt the strain of responsibility acutely, the constant pressure of decision-making, the knowledge that every life aboard the Aurora, every possibility for humanity's future, rested partially on her judgment. She recognized the delicate balance required, to maintain authority without suppressing individuality, to guide without controlling, to inspire without overburdening. Her own mental fortitude was tested daily, a private challenge that mirrored those faced by her crew. By the end of the second week, the human factor had become a defining element of the mission. Space demanded technical mastery, yes, but it demanded more: emotional intelligence, patience, empathy, and the relentless ability to endure. The crew had glimpsed the duality of humanity, capable of precision and error, courage and fear, resilience and fragility. It was both their greatest strength and their greatest vulnerability. The anomaly outside remained unchanged, pulsing with a rhythm that was both mysterious and unsettling. And as the Aurora continued deeper into the void, the crew understood a stark truth: survival depended not only on their technology or training, but on each other, on their capacity to manage the human factor that had the power to make or break this historic journey. Elara looked across the ship one night, eyes scanning the quiet hum of monitors and sleeping compartments. She knew that the challenge of space was not only external, it was internal. Humanity's greatest enemy and its greatest ally were the minds and hearts aboard the ship. The stars waited. And to reach them, to uncover the secrets of the void, the human factor would have to endure, adapt, and overcome. The Aurora had settled into the rhythm of interstellar travel. Days bled into nights, though without the familiar cycle of Earth, time had taken on a fluid, almost meaningless quality. The crew had adapted to weightlessness, routines, and isolation. They had learned to manage the human factor, the tensions, the fear, the subtle psychological cracks that threatened to weaken even the most disciplined. And yet, the void still held secrets that no preparation could anticipate. It began subtly. The anomaly they had first detected near the dying star continued to pulse, but now, faint signals appeared intertwined with it, patterns so subtle that at first, they could have been dismissed as noise. Dr. Elara Myles was the first to notice. At her station, she traced the signals across multiple channels, cross-referencing wavelengths, filtering background radiation, and checking for any interference from the ship itself. "What is that?" muttered Lieutenant Kieran, peering over her shoulder. "It doesn't match any known cosmic phenomenon." Elara didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the scrolling data, mind racing through possibilities. "It's structured," she said finally. "There's rhythm here. Repetition. A pattern that repeats, but not randomly. Someone, or something, is sending this." The idea hung in the air like a pulse, faint but insistent. The implications were staggering. After centuries of searching for life beyond Earth, after countless probes, signals, and simulations, humanity might have its first true contact, not with a creature, but with a signal of intelligence embedded in the cosmos. For the first time, the crew experienced something akin to collective awe. They gathered around monitors, noting the subtle changes in frequency, the minute variations in amplitude, the almost imperceptible sequence that repeated itself across multiple wavelengths. Unlike the previous anomaly, this signal seemed purposeful, deliberate, almost communicative. Yet awe mingled with fear. None could ignore the fact that intelligence in the void was unknown, and unknown intelligence could be indifferent, or hostile. The crew debated endlessly. Should they attempt to respond? Could they even respond? What if their presence was already observed? Every decision carried weight far beyond the normal stakes of exploration. Elara convened a council of the senior science team. "We do not know what we're dealing with," she said, voice calm but firm. "It could be natural, it could be life, or it could be something entirely beyond comprehension. Our first priority is observation and documentation. Nothing more. We interfere only if we have to." Even with restraint, the crew could not ignore the allure of the signals. Some began theorizing wildly: an alien intelligence, a cosmic message encoded in radiation, or even a natural phenomenon that mimicked intelligence. Patterns emerged, subtle and complex, forming sequences that could not exist by chance. To Elara, the signal seemed almost like a language, mathematical, precise, but impossible to decipher fully. Sleep became restless. Crew members reported seeing shapes in peripheral vision, fleeting glows outside observation ports, and feeling an inexplicable awareness pressing against the hull. Fatigue amplified these effects. Yet no one dismissed them outright. The anomaly seemed to touch not just sensors, but minds, affecting perception, intuition, and perhaps even emotion. It was as if the void itself had begun to acknowledge their presence. As hours turned to days, Elara led systematic attempts to interpret the signals. The team mapped sequences, searched for recurring primes, tested correlations with pulsar emissions, and analyzed for potential modulation indicative of communication. Slowly, patterns became evident. There was repetition. A structure. Something deliberate. The universe, once indifferent, seemed to have sent a message. Whether it was a greeting, a warning, or simply a manifestation of intelligence beyond comprehension, they could not yet know. Tensions surfaced again. Some crew members argued that they were losing focus, becoming consumed by obsession with the signals instead of monitoring critical ship systems. Others insisted the signals could not be ignored, that they might be the discovery humanity had been waiting for since leaving Earth. Debates grew heated, as the crew balanced fear, fascination, and the burden of responsibility. One night, as Elara reviewed the latest analysis alone, a subtle realization struck her. The signal was not static, it adjusted in response to the aurora's position. It was as if the anomaly had awareness, monitoring, or even interacting with their ship. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. If true, they were no longer merely observers, they were participants in an encounter with something conscious, something vast, something beyond human comprehension. She called the senior crew together immediately. "It's reacting," she said quietly, pointing to the graphs. "It knows we're here. It's adapting." The room fell silent. No one spoke at first. The idea that the void could perceive them, respond to them, was almost incomprehensible. And yet, the data confirmed it. The signals shifted subtly whenever the ship adjusted trajectory, changed speed, or altered energy output. There was intelligence here, and it was aware. Caution was critical. Elara emphasized observation over interference. Any attempt at direct communication could be misinterpreted, or worse, provoke a response they could not withstand. The crew obeyed, though anxiety simmered just beneath the surface. The first real encounter with the unknown had arrived, and it was no longer theoretical. The void was alive with subtle, intelligent signals, and humanity was no longer alone in witnessing it. The psychological strain intensified. Some crew members began reporting dreams that seemed influenced by the anomaly, abstract symbols, sequences of light, and fleeting visions of forms they could not identify. Others felt a persistent, unshakable awareness, as if unseen eyes were watching, probing the edges of consciousness. Even the most rational minds aboard the Aurora were tested. The human factor, already fragile under isolation, became entwined with the cosmic mystery, creating tension and fascination in equal measure. Despite the fear, there was exhilaration. For centuries, humanity had looked outward, sending probes, listening to signals, dreaming of contact. Now, for the first time, the void had responded, not with noise, not with randomness, but with structured patterns hinting at intelligence. The discovery was both breathtaking and terrifying. Humanity had crossed a threshold. They were no longer alone in observing the cosmos, in some form, was acknowledging them. Elara, watching the signals pulse and shift, allowed herself a quiet thought: this is what we came for. The stars are alive, and we are finally seeing them for what they are. But the universe is patient. It does not give answers freely. And whatever is out there, it is watching. The first signals in the darkness had arrived. They were subtle, enigmatic, and full of possibility. And as the Aurora sailed further into the void, the crew understood that these signals were more than anomalies, they were the beginning of contact, the first brush with intelligence beyond Earth, and the opening of a chapter that would challenge everything humanity thought it knew about life, the universe, and their place within it. The Aurora drifted closer to a dense, glowing nebula, a cloud of gas and dust stretching for light years. From a distance, it had been a soft shimmer, an iridescent haze against the blackness of space. Now, under the scrutiny of the ship's instruments, it revealed patterns that were anything but natural. Subtle pulses of light emanated from within the swirling gas, rhythmic, deliberate, signals that repeated with uncanny precision. Dr. Elara Myles stared at the monitors, tracing the pulses. Each flare, each oscillation, seemed to follow a hidden logic, as though the nebula itself was alive, or someone, or something, was embedded within it. She called the science team to her station, and they watched in silence, mesmerized. No known physical phenomenon could explain the regularity, the variation, the almost mathematical perfection of the pulses. "Is it life?" whispered Lieutenant Kieran. Her voice trembled with awe and fear. Elara hesitated. "Not life as we know it," she said slowly. "But it's organized. Intentional. Someone, or something, is sending this. And it's waiting for us to notice." The crew spent hours observing. The pulses responded subtly to changes in the Aurora's position and energy output. When the ship adjusted course, the intensity shifted, almost like a greeting, or a test. Patterns emerged within patterns, fractal sequences repeating at scales both small and immense. Every observation revealed more questions than answers. Isolation amplified their perceptions. Crew members reported faint impressions, shadows flickering at the edge of vision, whispers of light in the darkness, even a sense of being observed by an intelligence far older and more vast than humanity. Yet the nebula's signals were neither hostile nor overtly communicative. They were patient, enigmatic, like a riddle meant to awaken curiosity rather than fear. Elara coordinated attempts to log every detail, mapping the pulses across wavelength, frequency, and amplitude. She hypothesized that the nebula itself might be a medium for intelligence, its gases and particles shaped over millennia to transmit subtle information. If true, it was the most extraordinary discovery in human history, life, thought, or consciousness encoded in the very fabric of a stellar nursery. As the hours passed, the crew became acutely aware of their own vulnerability. The nebula was beautiful, mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, but beauty in the void often carried hidden danger. Any miscalculation in navigation or observation could be catastrophic. And yet, they could not look away. Every pulse, every shift, seemed to beckon, urging them to understand, to respond, to participate in the first true dialogue between humanity and the cosmos. Elara leaned back, exhausted but electrified by possibility. The nebula's signals were more than data, they were a challenge, a puzzle, and an invitation. The universe had begun to speak in ways humanity could almost, but not entirely, comprehend. And for the first time since leaving Earth, the crew of the Aurora felt both insignificant and indispensable, small vessels of fragile life, tasked with listening to the language of stars. The nebula shimmered silently beyond the hull, its pulses continuing, patient and eternal. And the Aurora, suspended in the void, prepared to answer in ways no one yet could imagine. Elara coordinated attempts to log every detail, mapping the pulses across wavelength, frequency, and amplitude. She hypothesized that the nebula itself might be a medium for intelligence, its gases and particles shaped over millennia to transmit subtle information. If true, it was the most extraordinary discovery in human history, life, thought, or consciousness encoded in the very fabric of a stellar nursery. As the hours passed, the crew became acutely aware of their own vulnerability. The nebula was beautiful, mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, but beauty in the void often carried hidden danger. Any miscalculation in navigation or observation could be catastrophic. And yet, they could not look away. Every pulse, every shift, seemed to beckon, urging them to understand, to respond, to participate in the first true dialogue between humanity and the cosmos. Elara leaned back, exhausted but electrified by possibility. The nebula's signals were more than data, they were a challenge, a puzzle, and an invitation. The universe had begun to speak in ways humanity could almost, but not entirely, comprehend. And for the first time since leaving Earth, the crew of the Aurora felt both insignificant and indispensable, small vessels of fragile life, tasked with listening to the language of stars. The nebula shimmered silently beyond the hull, its pulses continuing, patient and eternal. And the Aurora, suspended in the void, prepared to answer in ways no one yet could imagine. The nebula's pulses had become a constant presence, a subtle rhythm threading through the ship's instruments, through the minds of the crew. For days, they had observed, recorded, and speculated. Now, Elara Myles convened the science team for the first coordinated attempt at decoding the signals. Everything we've seen suggests intelligence, Elara began, voice calm but firm. The structure, the repetition, the responsiveness to our presence, it's deliberate. We need to treat it as a language, or at least as communication, rather than a natural phenomenon. The crew gathered in the main observation module, Monitors flickered with streams of pulsing light and data waves. Patterns repeated, sequences nested within sequences, fractal and recursive. Some pulses were rapid, others elongated, almost melodic. No human language could replicate the complexity, yet there was unmistakable order. Lieutenant Kieran mapped the sequences against known mathematical constants, primes, Fibonacci series, binary patterns. Some of these pulses correlate with prime numbers, she noted. Repeated primes, at irregular intervals, but consistent enough to suggest intention. Exactly, Elara said. Intelligence leaves patterns. The universe doesn't produce primes like this randomly. Someone, or something, designed it. As hours passed, the crew attempted to construct a visual representation of the sequences, layering pulse data on fractal maps, converting amplitude to spatial grids. Slowly, faint symmetries emerged, triangular shapes within hexagonal grids, spirals nested in spirals. It was as though the nebula had encoded something vast and complex, a language written across gas and light. But interpretation proved treacherous. Each hypothesis seemed to lead to more questions. Were these symbols informational, like a message? Or were they environmental, a form of self-organization beyond comprehension? Could they be a warning, or an invitation? Every conclusion was tentative, every assumption fragile. Fatigue crept into the crew. Sleep cycles fragmented, eyes strained from constant analysis, mind stretched thin by endless patterns. And yet, the nebula's pulses demanded attention. It was not just a signal, it was a presence, a force that commanded notice, subtly influencing perception. Some reported fleeting sensations of motion in peripheral vision, whispers in empty corridors, dreams filled with abstract light and sound. The nebula's influence extended beyond instruments, it touched minds directly, reshaping attention and focus. Elara worked tirelessly, maintaining careful logs, coordinating observations, and mediating discussions. We cannot rush this, she reminded the team. Our goal is to understand, not to provoke. The nebula structure is fragile, and our interpretations are provisional. Precision and patience are essential. Weeks passed. Slowly, patterns became recognizable as structured sequences, hints of repetition beyond randomness. The team noticed correlations between pulse duration and intensity, suggesting a layered message, perhaps a code nested within the light. The realization was exhilarating and terrifying. If the nebula was alive, if it was intelligent, they were attempting first contact on its terms, in a language humanity barely understood. Tension ran high. Some crew members grew frustrated, demanding more direct action, transmitting signals, attempting to respond. Others urged caution, warning that any misstep could be catastrophic. Elara mediated carefully, balancing curiosity with restraint. She knew that interpretation was as much an art as a science, and human impatience could compromise the mission. At night, in quiet moments, the pulses continued unabated outside the hull, glowing faintly against the void. They seemed patient, eternal, yet deliberate. And as the crew worked, documenting, hypothesizing, and decoding, one truth became undeniable: the nebula was a first voice of intelligence in the cosmos, and humanity had been given the unprecedented task of listening. Elara paused, gazing at the flowing patterns of light. "We are not just observers," she murmured. "We are participants. The nebula is teaching us how to listen. And if we are patient, careful, maybe, we can begin to understand its language." The aurora continued its drift through the cosmic cloud, surrounded by gas and starlight, pulses and whispers. The human crew, fragile, flawed, and brilliant, worked together, deciphering a voice older than Earth, learning that the universe could speak in ways they had never imagined. And somewhere within the nebula, the signals continued, waiting, patient, eternal. After weeks of observation, patterns within the nebula began to clarify. What had seemed like random pulses now revealed a deliberate sequence, a structure repeating across multiple scales, a language of light etched into the swirling gases. Dr. Elara Myles and her team leaned over the monitors, hearts racing. For the first time, they sensed comprehension, faint but undeniable. "It's a message," Lieutenant Kieran whispered, voice trembling. "Not words, not like we speak, but information, instruction, maybe even an invitation." The crew spent hours translating, layering pulse data, correlating intensity with duration, plotting fractal sequences against temporal rhythms. Slowly, the nebula seemed to respond to their attention. Each adjustment of the ship, each shift in focus, brought subtle changes in the signal. It was not just a broadcast, it was an interaction, a dialogue conducted in light and pattern. Elara realized the enormity of what they faced. They were witnessing a form of intelligence embedded in the very fabric of a stellar cloud, communication without voice or body, entirely alien yet deliberate. The signals hinted at knowledge beyond human experience, maps of star clusters, energy flows, structures suggesting civilizations long vanished or yet to emerge. The nebula had encoded its history, its logic, its awareness. The crew felt a mix of exhilaration and humility. Humanity had reached beyond its cradle and found not just life, but consciousness woven into the universe itself. Every pulse, every shimmer, demanded careful observation, careful respect. Elara whispered to herself, "It is teaching us, and waiting for us to learn." The nebula continued to glow, patient and eternal. Its message, now partially understood, opened a window into the cosmos' profound intelligence, revealing that the universe was not empty, not silent, but alive, and humanity had finally found a way to listen. The nebula's signals had been a puzzle, but now something entirely new emerged. The aurora's sensors picked up localized fluctuations in electromagnetic fields and energy pulses that didn't match any natural cosmic patterns. They moved with purpose, responding to the ship's presence, subtle but undeniable. Dr. Elara Myles studied the readings with a mixture of awe and caution. This is life," she whispered, almost to herself. "Not as we know it, but alive nonetheless." Outside the hull, faint, luminous shapes drifted through the void. They were amorphous, constantly shifting, glowing with a bioluminescence unlike anything terrestrial. Each movement seemed deliberate, synchronized, almost like a dance choreographed across the fabric of space. Instruments suggested the forms were reacting to the aurora, shifting when scanned, pulsing in response to the ship's energy emissions. The crew's excitement was tempered by the weight of responsibility. They had long searched for life beyond Earth, and now they were witnessing it firsthand. These beings, if they could be called that, seemed intelligent, interacting with their environment and the nebula's signals in a coordinated way. Elara meticulously logged every observation, noting patterns in light, movement, and energy. This was not just life, it was consciousness operating on a scale and frequency humanity had never encountered. The first signs of life beyond Earth were no longer theoretical or abstract. They were tangible, radiant, and mysterious. As the aurora hovered in silent observation, the crew felt the profound weight of discovery, small humans witnessing the universe's creativity firsthand, standing at the threshold of contact with life utterly alien yet undeniably alive. Days in the void stretched endlessly. The crew of the aurora had adapted to weightlessness and routine, yet the isolation began to gnaw at their minds. Sleep became fragmented, dreams bled into reality, and the constant hum of machinery never allowed for true silence. Crew members reported fleeting shadows at the edge of vision, whispers that vanished when attention focused, and a persistent feeling of being watched. The nebula's signals, once just data, now seemed to influence perception itself. Some felt compelled to stare at monitors for hours, tracing patterns no one could fully understand. Fatigue made even simple tasks feel monumental. A misread instrument or a delayed observation could trigger anxiety that rippled through the team. Tension between crew members grew. Minor disagreements over priorities escalated into sharp debates. Some questioned Elara's insistence on meticulous observation of the nebula, others argued that understanding the signals was paramount, even if it risked exhaustion or oversight of ship systems. Trust was tested. Patience frayed. Elara recognized the strain immediately. Leadership demanded more than competence, it required empathy, vigilance, and the ability to maintain morale without ignoring the creeping fatigue and fear. Quiet interventions, gentle reminders of shared purpose, and structured routines became lifelines. The void was indifferent, yet its silence was oppressive. The psychological strain was the invisible challenge, as dangerous as rogue asteroids or micrometeoroid strikes. It reminded the crew that the human mind, even disciplined and trained, was fragile in the face of isolation, incomprehensible patterns, and the infinite unknown. To survive the void, they would need not just skill, but resilience, trust, and the capacity to endure uncertainty together. The aurora drifted through the void, the nebula's pulses glowing faintly outside the hull. Within the ship, the crew's discussions had grown tense. Observation of the signals had consumed days of energy and focus, and now a debate emerged: should they continue cautiously, prioritizing safety, or push further into unknown territory in pursuit of discovery? Lieutenant Kieran argued passionately. "We came here to explore, to understand, to find what no human has ever seen. If we hesitate, we risk losing the opportunity entirely. These signals, they're intelligent. They're a message. We can't just drift safely while the universe passes by." Engineer Marlowe countered, voice measured but firm. "Exploration is meaningless if we don't survive to report it. Every deviation, every untested maneuver, increases risk. The nebula is beautiful, yes, but it's also unstable. Gravitational eddies, particle density fluctuations, electromagnetic anomalies. One mistake and the aurora is lost. We cannot gamble recklessly." Elara watched both sides carefully, understanding the stakes. She knew the crew's passion came from curiosity, from the thrill of discovery. Yet she also understood the importance of caution. One catastrophic error could destroy not just the mission, but humanity's first chance at interstellar observation. The debate became heated. Some crew members wanted to respond to the nebula's pulses directly, attempt communication through modulated signals. Others insisted on restraint, worried that interaction could provoke unforeseen consequences. Arguments overlapped with fatigue, hunger, and the psychological strain of isolation. Voices rose and fell, frustration mingling with excitement. Finally, Elara spoke, calm and authoritative. "Exploration and safety are not mutually exclusive," she said. "We proceed methodically. Observation first. Documentation first. Experimentation only when risk is controlled. The universe will not be conquered by recklessness, it will be understood by patience, precision, and courage combined." The crew reluctantly accepted the compromise. Exploration would continue, but within defined parameters. Every maneuver, every observation, every hypothesis would be measured against the ship's safety protocols. It was a balance as delicate as the nebula itself. The thrill of discovery weighed against the fragility of life in the void. As the ship hummed through the cosmic cloud, the crew felt the tension ease slightly, but the debate left a lingering truth: the universe demanded courage, curiosity, and caution, and the first signs of life beyond Earth would require all three. The aurora emerged from the shimmering veil of the nebula into open space, and before the crew stretched an alien horizon, a massive exoplanet, suspended like a jewel in the black. Its surface glowed faintly in iridescent hues, greens, blues, and purples shifting like liquid under an invisible wind. Fractured cloud patterns revealed chasms and canyons, deep and winding, cutting through the planet's crust as though the land itself had been torn and reshaped over millennia. Dr. Elara Myles pressed close to the observation port, heart pounding. "This is extraordinary," she murmured. "It's alive, in ways we haven't yet imagined. Not just the signals we detected, the planet itself seems conscious, structured, and reactive. Sensors detected strange electromagnetic fields, pulses that mirrored patterns observed in the nebula. Atmospheric scans suggested the presence of complex molecules, possible precursors to life, or perhaps a kind of planetary-scale intelligence. Each reading hinted at systems interwoven with one another, surface formations, atmospheric currents, and subtle energy fluctuations working in synchrony. Lieutenant Kieran adjusted the navigation feed. "We can maintain orbit," she said cautiously. "But landing is untested. Gravity fluctuates slightly in unpredictable ways, and surface readings indicate volatile terrain. We'll need extreme caution if we attempt descent." The crew felt a mix of awe and trepidation. This was the culmination of years of preparation, decades of human curiosity, and countless scientific dreams. And yet, the alien beauty carried unease. The fractured terrain suggested instability, the magnetic anomalies hinted at hidden dangers, and the subtle responsiveness of the planet to their presence reminded them that this was not a passive environment. Elara convened the team in the observation module. "We document everything first. We analyze every signal, every fluctuation, before any direct interaction. The planet may be intelligent, or it may react unpredictably. Our approach must be precise, measured, and unified." As the aurora stabilized in orbit, the fractured horizon stretched endlessly below, a landscape at once beautiful and threatening. Humanity had arrived, not just at a distant world, but at the edge of understanding itself, where every mountain, canyon, and pulse hinted at mysteries waiting to be unraveled. The aurora's descent was gradual, deliberate, each thruster adjustment measured to perfection. The fractured terrain of the exoplanet stretched below in a shifting mosaic of colors and shadows, illuminated by faint reflections from the swirling atmosphere above. Canyon walls, jagged and immense, cut across valleys filled with shimmering gases that glowed faintly in pulses reminiscent of the nebula's signals. Dr. Elara Myles and the exploration team prepared the landing module, hearts pounding with anticipation and tension. Years of planning had led to this moment, humanity's first physical encounter with a world unlike any they had seen before. Every instrument, every sensor, every system on the module was double-checked, ensuring that no error could jeopardize the delicate landing. Lieutenant Kieran piloted the descent, navigating between unpredictable gravitational fluctuations and volatile energy currents. "Steady," she muttered, eyes scanning the readouts. "We're entering a zone of high electromagnetic activity. Keep sensors on full sweep." The landing was smoother than expected, though the surface trembled subtly beneath them. Rocks that should have been inert shimmered faintly, as though resonating with some unseen frequency. Atmospheric samples indicated complex organic compounds, structures that suggested microbial life, or something far more complex, interwoven with mineral formations. Stepping onto the surface, the crew felt the alien gravity pressing differently than Earth's, lighter but inconsistent, tugging subtly at every movement. The air, though breathable through filtered systems, carried faint electrical charges that made hair stand on end and equipment hum softly. Every step seemed to trigger subtle pulses in the environment, hinting that the planet itself was aware of their presence. Elara led the team with careful observation, documenting every detail. Shadows shifted in ways that defied predictable physics, patterns emerged in rock formations, and light bent subtly as it passed through atmospheric anomalies. The planet was alive in an unfamiliar sense, its intelligence not biological in the conventional way, but distributed across terrain, atmosphere, and energy currents. Crew members whispered in awe, some recording rapid-fire observations, others simply pausing to absorb the alien beauty. It was a landscape of paradox, fragile and violent, silent yet resonant, incomprehensible yet structured. Every pulse, every shimmer seemed to communicate, not in words, but in patterns. Hours passed. Initial scans revealed fractal energy signatures beneath the surface, possible conduits for unknown processes, or even life forms yet to reveal themselves. Elara realized that this was not merely exploration, it was a dialogue, a cautious interaction with a planet that was both environment and consciousness. As the sun, or the closest approximation of it, dipped behind jagged peaks, the Aurora's crew gathered near the module. They were no longer just observers, they were participants in a world alive with patterns, pulses, and possibilities. Exploration had begun, but the planet had made one thing clear: every discovery came with mystery, and every step forward demanded both courage and humility. The exoplanet's surface was unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. As the Aurora's crew ventured further into jagged valleys and glowing plains, subtle anomalies began to manifest. Rocks that had appeared solid shimmered faintly when touched. Shadows bent in impossible angles. Light seemed to ripple across the air itself, warping perception, and causing even experienced observers to question what they were seeing. Dr. Elara Myles paused near a crystalline formation. Its structure was intricate, fractal, impossible to replicate with human tools. As she reached out, the crystal appeared to respond, pulsing softly, almost like a heartbeat. She blinked, but the pulse persisted. Instruments recorded the energy, yet the human eye perceived a rhythm that no sensor could fully quantify. Reality itself felt unstable. Lieutenant Kieran's voice broke the silence. The gravity readings are fluctuating. Not gradual, spiking unpredictably. Something in this environment is interacting with mass differently than anything we've studied. The crew noticed the psychological effects almost immediately. Time seemed to stretch and compress. A single hour could feel like minutes, seconds could expand into eternity. Auditory perception shifted, soft hums, whispers, and harmonics threaded through the air, sometimes synchronizing with the pulses of light from the terrain. Dreams and wakefulness began to blur, with crew members reporting visions of impossible landscapes overlaying the exoplanet's actual terrain. Elara realized that the planet's intelligence, if that's what it was not confined to simple signals or organisms. The entire environment appeared to be a cognitive system, one capable of altering perception and challenging human sensory and mental limits. Each step forward required awareness not just of physical obstacles but of how the crew's minds interpreted reality itself. Marlowe, the engineer, touched a floating shard of energy that seemed suspended in midair. Immediately, the landscape shifted, canyons stretched, peaks rose, and colors warped across the sky. When he withdrew his hand, the terrain reformed, though subtly different, as if acknowledging his action. The planet was interactive, responsive, and unpredictable. Every decision, every movement, affected it, and by extension, those who traversed it. The crew understood a chilling truth: their senses could no longer be trusted completely. What they saw might not exist, what they felt could be induced, and what they interpreted could be manipulated by forces beyond comprehension. Survival on this world depended not only on careful observation and measurement but on mental discipline, intuition, and the ability to accept uncertainty without panic. As the Aurora's team paused to recalibrate instruments and check psychological logs, Elara addressed the crew. "This world is not just an environment," she said, voice firm but tinged with awe. "It is a consciousness. And it is teaching us something fundamental. In the vastness of the cosmos, reality itself can be fluid. We must adapt, observe, and respect it, or risk losing ourselves entirely. The sky above shimmered with impossible colors, valleys bent like liquid, and the pulses of the planet whispered unseen patterns. Humanity had crossed into a frontier where perception and existence intertwined, where exploration demanded not only courage and knowledge but an acceptance that reality itself was no longer fixed. The exoplanet's strange, shifting landscape tested more than the aurora's instruments, it tested the crew themselves. As the days wore on, subtle psychological pressures began to surface, amplified by the alien environment. Shadows warped, light pulsed unpredictably, and every step carried the weight of uncertainty. With each passing hour, tension threaded through the crew, silent but palpable, shaping interactions, decisions, and the fragile balance of trust. Dr. Elara Myles noticed the first cracks during routine observation shifts. Lieutenant Kieran's usually steady hands trembled slightly while adjusting the landing module sensors. Engineer Marlowe muttered under his breath, replaying data sequences over and over, as if trying to catch anomalies no one else could perceive. Fatigue and isolation intensified small disagreements. Words, once measured, now carried sharper edges. Decisions that would normally have been routine sparked debates, sometimes heated. The emotional strain was subtle but relentless. Crew members began withdrawing into themselves, eyes lingering on the alien horizon for hours without speaking. Others clung to each other, seeking reassurance in whispered conversations or brief shared laughter, fragile bonds against an overwhelming unknown. The exoplanet's shifting reality seemed to mirror internal states. When stress peaked, perception warped further, amplifying uncertainty. Elara herself felt it. Leadership demanded composure, but the constant vigilance and responsibility for 50 lives pressed heavily on her mind. At night, she stared at the fractal valleys below, haunted by the thought that one misstep could unravel the mission or worse, endanger the crew. Anxiety, exhilaration, and awe intertwined, creating a mental pressure that no training could fully prepare one for. Conflict and fear mingled with curiosity. Some crew members wanted to press forward immediately, chasing every anomaly, risking safety for discovery. Others urged restraint, arguing that the planet's intelligence required observation before interaction. The divide became emotional as much as intellectual, loyalty clashed with curiosity, courage with caution. Elara convened a quiet council in the observation module. "We are not just explorers," she said softly. "We are witnesses to a consciousness far older and greater than ourselves. Our emotions matter, they guide our caution, but they must not rule our judgment. Trust in each other, in our training, and in the careful process we've established. The planet tests us, but we can endure if we act as one." As the crew absorbed her words, tension eased only slightly. The exoplanet's pulsing light and shifting terrain reflected their uncertainty, reminding them that discovery came with fear, and understanding came at the cost of emotional endurance. In the vast silence of the void, the greatest challenge was no longer physical, it was the human heart and mind, navigating awe, anxiety, and the weight of the unknown. The aurora hovered just above the fractured plains, the alien exoplanet stretching endlessly beneath the hull. The crew had been on the surface for hours, carefully documenting each anomaly, each pulse of light, each subtle shift in terrain. What they were beginning to realize was terrifying: this world was alive, not in a biological sense alone, but in a conscious, responsive way. Dr. Elara Myles led a cautious survey of the crystalline formations that dotted a nearby chasm. Every movement of the crew seemed to provoke subtle reactions. Crystals glowed brighter, pulses accelerated, shadows twisted, and light warped around them. Instruments recorded data, but readings fluctuated wildly, sometimes contradicting one another, as if the environment itself was interfering with measurement. "Look at this," whispered Lieutenant Kieran, pointing to a series of pulses along the canyon walls. They appeared almost deliberate, like a pattern or sequence meant to communicate. "It's trying to tell us something." Elara nodded, her mind racing. "Or warning us. We don't know which yet." The air hummed faintly, resonating through the hull and the landing module like the vibration of a distant chord. The crew felt it in their bones, a subtle pressure that made every movement feel heavy, every breath deliberate. Even small mistakes seemed magnified, every decision weighted with consequence. Suddenly, Marlowe froze, staring at a shadow that stretched across the canyon floor. The formation wasn't moving, but it was changing, morphing slowly into shapes that resembled living organisms. Tentative pulses of bioluminescence flickered along its surface, and as the module's sensors tried to record the phenomenon, readings spiked erratically, displaying impossible energy levels. Elara felt a chill. "Keep calm," she said, though her voice carried tension she could not hide. "Record everything. Do not approach until we understand it." But the world around them refused patience. The landscape rippled suddenly, folding like liquid glass. Valleys twisted, crystalline spires bent toward the module, and light itself seemed to pulse in synchronization with the canyon's shapes. Every instrument on board went into overload, alarms blaring as energy fluctuations surged unpredictably. A low hum grew into a resonance that vibrated through the hull. Crew members grabbed each other for balance as the exoplanet seemed to react directly to their presence, testing boundaries, asserting control. Shadows elongated into forms that defied physics, pulsating with light patterns that were simultaneously beautiful and menacing. And then, just as abruptly, the world fell silent. The hum vanished. The rippling stopped. The crystalline formations dimmed. The canyon floor became still. Instruments returned to normal, but the crew could feel it in their minds, an awareness lingering, a presence watching. Elara's voice barely rose above a whisper. "It knows we're here, and it's waiting." Outside the observation window, a single pulse of blinding light shot up from the deepest chasm, illuminating the entire landscape for an instant. When the glow faded, the crew's instruments detected movement, something vast, impossibly massive, emerging from the fractured terrain. Its form was indistinct, shifting, like liquid shadow and light entwined. Kieran swallowed hard. "Whatever that is, it's coming toward us." The Aurora's hull trembled slightly, thrusters engaged automatically, but the crew froze, staring at the horizon. The exoplanet had revealed the first tangible manifestation of its intelligence, and whatever it was aware of them, moving with purpose, and far beyond anything humanity had ever faced. Elara gripped the console. "Brace yourselves, this is just the beginning." The shadow loomed closer, and the chapter of their journey ended not with understanding, but with a question: would the Aurora survive contact, or would this world, alive and aware, redefine humanity's place in the cosmos forever? The shadow that rose from the fractured terrain eventually faded back into the planet's depths, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt engineered. The crew of the Aurora retreated to orbit, shaken, breathless, and painfully aware that the world beneath them was more than alive, it was watching. The next step wasn't bravado. It wasn't courage. It was necessity. They had to understand what this world was, and who had shaped it. Dr. Elara Myles activated the deep scan array, eyes locked on the holographic projections. "We're picking up buried structures," she said, voice low. "Massive ones. Too symmetrical to be natural. Too old to be recent." The scans revealed it gradually, a sprawling network of geometric foundations hidden beneath miles of terrain. Rings, corridors, towers collapsed horizontally, like bones of a colossal organism frozen in time. The crew stared, stunned, as the hologram filled the room with ghostly blue shapes. "Yo, that's a whole city," Marlowe whispered, almost reverent. Or something way beyond one. Kieran swallowed hard. How old? Elara zoomed in on layered strata. Older than Earth's first civilizations. Older than our species. We're talking millions of years. Silence settled over the room, heavy, unreal. Humans had barely mastered interstellar travel. And now they were looking at evidence of a species that had mastered reality itself. The descent to the structure wasn't casual, it was a slow, tense crawl into the unknown. The landing module touched down near what appeared to be a sunken plaza, massive stone-like slabs covered in patterns, not carved but grown, as if the architecture sprouted from the ground. The air buzzed faintly with leftover energy, like the dying echo of a civilization that once moved mountains with thought alone. Elara stepped forward. The ground responded. Faint lines lit up beneath her boots, tracing paths across the ruins like veins. It's recognizing us, she whispered. Or verifying us. The crew spread out, documenting details with a reverence usually reserved for sacred places. Strange pillars stood half-buried, each one covered in symbols that flickered between shape and pattern, refusing to stay fixed. Some looked like mathematical equations. Others, almost like language. Kieran crouched beside a cracked monolith. A pulsing line ran through it, alive despite its age. They weren't just advanced, she said. They were connected to this planet. Literally. The architecture has the same fractal patterns we've seen in the terrain. Marlowe exhaled sharply. So the planet didn't just grow life. It grew cities. Elara froze. That single sentence hit her with the weight of a revelation too big to ignore. If the planet was conscious. If these structures were grown, not built. Then this civilization wasn't separate from the world, they were part of it. Symbiotic. Integrated. Merged. A flash of light rippled through the ruins, and a section of the plaza split open, revealing a descending staircase. Not mechanical. Not natural. A deliberate invitation. Should we go in? Kieran asked, voice barely steady. Elara didn't answer immediately. Her heartbeat hammered in her ears, fighting between instinct and responsibility. Curiosity versus survival, an old war. But this? This was history calling across eons. We go, she said finally. Carefully. Together. The crew stepped into the revealed passage. The walls glowed faintly with a warm, organic light, as though the civilization that built them had understood illumination not as electricity but as emotion. Symbols rippled across the surfaces, reacting to their presence. Some formed patterns reminiscent of DNA. Others looked like star maps, constellations long dead or unborn. Then Elara saw it, a mural carved in shifting, living stone. It showed beings, tall, fluid, luminous, standing beside a vast, pulsing sphere. The planet itself. They didn't live on this world, Elara whispered. They lived with it. The realization hit all at once. The ancient civilization wasn't gone. Not really. They had become the planet. And now the planet had noticed humanity, and was deciding what to do next. The ruins were silent, yet the silence felt staged. Manufactured. Almost intentional. As if the ancient civilization, or whatever consciousness still lingered in the planet's fabric, wanted the Aurora's crew to feel the weight of their own thoughts. And that's where the real conflict began. Not with weapons. Not with alien lifeforms. But with ideas, dangerous, beautiful, uncomfortable ideas. Dr. Elara Myles stood at the center of a vast chamber, the walls shifting with patterns that reacted to emotional signals as much as physical presence. Every time she exhaled, the symbols pulsed. Every time a thought sharpened, the color tone changed. Reality wasn't stable here, it danced alongside the mind. Her crew had spread out around her, Kieran, Marlowe, Asha, Ren. Each person was stuck in their own headspace, trapped between awe and existential dread. "This place," Asha whispered, touching a wall that moved like breathing stone. "It's forcing us to think." Literally. "Our thoughts are part of its design." Kieran scoffed under her breath. "Yeah, well, my thoughts right now are screaming that we should leave." But no one moved. The chamber projected images again, distorted silhouettes of the ancient civilization, luminous figures standing inside structures that seemed alive. They weren't showing dominance or destruction. They weren't warning. They were teaching. Demonstrating. Free-flowing knowledge across time. Marlowe stared at the holographic-like symbols dissolving in air. They didn't separate science from existence. They didn't separate themselves from nature. They lived inside a philosophy. Everything was connected. Thought, matter, consciousness, time. Elara felt a knot tightening in her chest. And we're the opposite. Humanity conquers. Classifies. Dissects. "Yeah," Kieran muttered, "we don't exactly vibe with becoming one with a planet." A pulse of light shot through the room, sharp, bright, immediate. The chamber reacted to their conflict. The walls folded inward for a moment, as though the structure itself inhaled. Elara steadied herself. "Everyone stop arguing. This planet, it's listening." Ren stepped back, shaking. "That's what scares me. If it listens, it understands. If it understands, what does it want?" No one had an answer. The tension grew heavier. Not fear, philosophical pressure. A massive, existential tug-of-war. Who were humans to explore this? Who were they to interpret something this ancient? Who were they to decide the purpose of a civilization that merged itself with an entire planet? Elara felt the weight of it. Humanity had always believed its intelligence was the apex. The peak. The final step of evolution. But this planet? This civilization? They didn't evolve to dominate their world, they evolved to become it. And that single idea shook the crew more than any danger they'd faced. Asha's voice trembled as she spoke again. "You realize what this means, right? Consciousness doesn't have to be biological. Intelligence doesn't have to be separate. They transcended. Not upward. Inward." "That's not transcendence," Kieran said sharply. "That's surrender. Losing yourself. Merging until individuality dies." "But maybe individuality is the cage," Marlowe replied quietly. "What if they let go of ego? What if their evolution wasn't losing themselves? What if it was leveling up beyond everything we think defines life?" Kieran rolled her eyes. "Spare me the cosmic TED Talk." A flare of light burst across the chamber, startling everyone. The walls lit up with sequences of symbols, familiar now. The same ones they had seen in earlier recon. Elara's breath hitched. "It's responding to our debate," she whispered. The chamber shifted again, this time projecting two distinct images. One of unity, shapes merging and harmonizing. One of division, sharp angles repelling each other. Two paths. Two philosophies. Two futures. Marlowe stepped forward, mesmerized. "They're asking us what kind of species we are. Whether we see ourselves as separate from the universe, or part of it." Kieran shook her head aggressively. We're explorers, not disciples. We're not here to join a hive mind or whatever. Maybe they aren't asking us to join, Elara said softly. Maybe they're asking if we even understand. The projection shifted again, this time showing Earth. Not perfectly, but close enough, blue, green, swirling white bands. And around it? Faint cracks of light. Fault lines. Stress fractures. A symbolic mirror of humanity's direction. Asha's eyes widened. It's saying our world is breaking. No, Elara murmured. It's saying we're breaking it. Silence fell. That was the tension point. The philosophical knife edge. Humanity believed progress meant expanding, consuming, controlling. This civilization believed progress meant integration, harmony, surrender of ego. Two completely different worldviews. And both were staring at each other across the void. Ren broke the silence with a simple question. So which path do we choose? Elara couldn't answer. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The chamber dimmed, lights folding inward like a closing eyelid. But before it sealed, one final pulse of light flashed across the stone. A question. For symbols. A choice meant for humans to answer. Kiran exhaled sharply. Great. The planet wants us to take a philosophy exam. Elara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her bones. No, she said quietly. It wants to know who we truly are. And the planet waited, silent, alive, endless, as humanity stood on the edge of a decision that could reshape not just their mission, but the future of their entire species. For a long moment, Elara just stood there, frozen, breath caught somewhere between awe and dread, as the alien chamber pulsed with a quiet, ancient rhythm. It wasn't light exactly. It wasn't sound. It was presence. Like the room itself was remembering something. Or someone. She reached her hand toward one of the floating glyph clusters. It shimmered, folding in on itself, and suddenly, she wasn't in the chamber anymore. She was everywhere. A flash, stars being born, blasting white against oceans of darkness. Another, civilizations rising like sparks across a cosmic night, burning bright, burning out. She felt consciousnesses shaped nothing like humans, yet still driven by the same fear, the universe is huge, and you are small. Then a deeper current pulled her in. She saw the ancient beings, the ones whose ruins the Aurora crew had just trespassed into. Tall silhouettes of shimmering, translucent matter, beings who didn't walk but flowed. Their minds were networks, their thoughts entire ecosystems. They had lived through epochs where galaxies collided like drifting lanterns. They weren't gods. They weren't monsters. They were just, further along. Elara saw them discover something terrible, the universe itself was shifting. Like a beat skipping in an infinite song. Physics bending at its edges. Constants wobbling. A countdown hidden in the fabric of everything. The ancients weren't just exploring. They were searching for a way out. Her heart hammered. She stumbled back into her body, gasping, hands shaking like she'd just touched the sun. The chamber was still there. Silent. But the truth was burning inside her now, bright and relentless. Humanity hadn't been the first to feel small beneath the stars. And they wouldn't be the last to realize the universe had an expiration date. The message wasn't, "Come find us." It was, "Don't make our mistakes." Elara felt her stomach twist. Because suddenly, everything humanity had believed, that exploration meant progress, that knowledge meant power, felt hollow. Fragile. The truth hit like gravity reasserting itself. The universe wasn't a stable stage to explore. It was a fragile system, slowly cracking. And humanity? They were toddlers playing with unknown machinery, celebrating bold steps forward while cosmic reality pulled the floor out from under them. For the first time in her life, Elara felt truly, painfully mortal. Small. Temporary. A spark in a universe that didn't promise tomorrow. But beneath the fear, something else rose, something fierce. If the ancients left a message, it meant there was still time to understand it. To survive what they couldn't. Elara straightened, steadying her breath, her eyes burning with a mix of terror and resolve. The universe wasn't done yet. And neither was she. The air inside the aurora felt heavier than the void outside. Not physically, emotionally, spiritually. Everyone sensed it. The ancient chamber's revelation hung over the crew like a storm cloud that refused to burst. Elara had barely finished explaining what she saw when the arguments began. The universe was cracking. The ancients had tried to evolve past physical form. And now, the crew had access to the same gateway. The alien structure hummed like it was waiting for them to decide. Return home, with the truth, the warnings, the proof. Or step into the unknown, to transcend, to become something more, something not entirely human. No option felt safe. The void does not forgive hesitation, Elara said, voice low, steady. It demands choice. The words hit the crew like a gravitational shift. Tarek stared at the glowing doorway. If we take this leap, we might never come back. Never see Earth again. But what's left to return to? Samara shot back. A dying universe? Should we just pretend we didn't learn the truth? Jonas paced like a trapped animal. We're explorers, not cosmic volunteers for ascension experiments. Elara listened, quiet, focused. Fear, hope, confusion, it all blended into a dense cocktail of human vulnerability. The ancients hadn't left instructions. Only possibilities. Ascend, escape the fate of decay. Return, warn humanity, maybe save billions. But no one guaranteed either path was real. The corridor lights flickered as if the ship itself felt the tension. Beyond the hull, the void stretched infinitely, indifferent to their struggle. Inside, the crew faced a decision that could ripple through all of human history, or erase them from it. Samara stepped forward. We came all this way looking for life. Maybe, this is the life we were meant to find. Jonas shook his head. Or maybe it's the same trap that killed the ancients. Silence tightened around them. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown. Every breath like a final moment before a fall. Elara finally spoke, voice calm but edged with fire. We choose together. Not out of fear. Not out of ego. But out of truth. The chamber pulsed softly, almost listening. Humanity had always reached for the stars. Now the stars were reaching back, asking what the crew was willing to become. The void demanded choice. And the moment to make it had arrived. The chamber glowed brighter than ever, as if sensing the human debate had reached its breaking point. Ribbons of alien light curled through the air like cosmic veins, pulsing to a rhythm that wasn't sound but understanding. It was the gateway, the same path the ancient civilization had taken when the universe began shifting beneath them. And now, the Aurora's crew stood on the edge of that same impossible crossroads. Ascend, or return. Elara felt the split forming before anyone spoke. It was like watching tectonic plates drift apart, slow, painful, but unavoidable. Every crew member carried different scars, different fears, different dreams. And the revelation they'd uncovered had stretched those differences until something had to break. Samara stepped toward the gateway first. Her eyes shimmered with something close to peace. I feel it, Elara. Like it's calling. Not forcing. Inviting. Elara's throat tightened. You're sure? Samara nodded. Look at what we know now. The universe is unstable. Civilization after civilization only ever fought the ticking clock. But this is evolution. A way out. A way up. She placed her hand on the arch of light. It responded instantly, glowing, flowing, recognizing her. The room felt alive with her choice. Behind her, Tarek hesitated, fists clenched. He looked between the gateway and his friends, torn like a man caught between gravity wells. If we ascend, we're not human anymore. Samara's voice softened. Maybe that's the point. Maybe survival means letting go of what we were. But Jonas stepped back sharply. Not me. Not like this. His voice cracked. Earth deserves to know. Humanity deserves the truth. We can't abandon everyone who never got the chance to choose. Elara felt both sides pulling at her. She understood Samara's awe, and Jonas's fear. The decision wasn't about bravery. It was about identity. What does it mean to stay human in a universe that's falling apart? Tarek finally exhaled shakily. I can't ascend. Not yet. I need to understand more. I need answers. And humanity, someone has to warn them. Someone has to try. Samara offered him a sad, knowing smile. Then we'll see each other as different kinds of stars. Elara placed a hand on her shoulder. If you go, you'll be beyond us. Beyond everything. Samara's eyes glowed with the reflection of the swirling gateway. Elara, maybe we were always meant to become more than flesh. One by one, those who chose ascension stepped forward. The light wrapped around them gently, like they were sinking into a warm ocean. Their bodies dissolved, not violently, but gracefully, as if returning to the energy that had birthed all life. They became luminous silhouettes. Then outlines. Then pure, drifting starlight. Gone, and yet not gone. The others, Elara, Jonas, Tarek, stood in the fading glow, shaken to their core. Their friends were now part of something vast and incomprehensible. And they were left with the weight of knowledge heavier than any gravity. They would return home, forever changed, carrying the truth. Humanity's future had split. Some would transcend. Some would fight to survive the collapsing cosmos. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would be the same again. The chamber dimmed into a soft cosmic dusk, the kind of light that made shadows stretch and memories feel heavier than they should. Elara stood with the remaining crew, watching the faint silhouettes of their ascending friends dissolve like stardust caught in slow motion. Each spark drifted upward, merging with the shimmering gateway until they were no longer bodies, but light. Consciousness. Presence. A hush fell over the chamber. Not silence, silence is empty. This was full. Heavy. Sacred. Tarek's voice cracked first. They're really gone, aren't they? Elara shook her head slowly. Not gone. Just, different. But the ache in her chest didn't care about definitions. Losing someone to death was one thing. Losing them to eternity was another. Jonas wiped at his eyes, pretending it was dust. I should have said more. Told Samara she was braver than all of us. You did, Elara murmured. She just heard it in ways you didn't speak. The three of them stood where the last of the light had faded, and for a moment, the emptiness felt unbearable. Then the chamber pulsed again, soft, warm, like a heartbeat in the walls. A final echo. A goodbye. Elara felt something brush her mind. Not a voice. A feeling. Familiar, gentle, full of love and possibility. Samara. And maybe others. A message without words. We're here. We're safe. Don't carry sorrow, carry purpose. Her breath hitched as she whispered. We looked at the stars and realized, they were us all along. Tarek swallowed hard. Do you think they can still think? Feel? Elara nodded. Yeah. Just differently. Their minds are open now. They're part of something bigger than anything we can understand. Jonas let out a shaky laugh. Figures. Samara always talked about wanting to see everything. Guess she meant literally. They gathered their remaining equipment, hands trembling not from fear, but from the weight of what had changed. The room felt less alien now. More like a memorial. A quiet testament to the moment humanity branched into two futures. As they turned to leave, Elara paused and placed her hand on the chamber wall. Goodbye, she whispered. Not dramatic. Not poetic. Just raw. Real. Tarek mimicked her, pressing his palm beside hers. I hope you find what we can't. Jonas hesitated, then joined them. Save a place for us, wherever you are. The chamber hummed a final time, like a sigh, like a blessing. And then the lights faded. The three remaining humans walked back toward the aurora, each step echoing louder than the last. The universe felt bigger now, scarier, but also strangely hopeful. Their friends were no longer bound by flesh or fear. They were part of the cosmic story, woven directly into the fabric of the stars. And as the crew looked out at the endless expanse, they realized something painful and beautiful at the same time. The stars weren't distant anymore. They weren't symbols or mysteries. They were family. They were home. And they were waiting. The aurora pierced through the dark like a wounded ember drifting home. No trumpets. No celebrations. Just three humans carrying truths too heavy for any ship to bear. Earth, or at least the closest human colony, came into view slowly, wrapped in familiar blues, greens, and city-like gold. After everything they'd seen, it felt impossibly small. Comforting, and heartbreakingly insignificant. A tiny island floating in a cosmic ocean with storms far beyond anyone's imagination. As the ship descended, Elara pressed her hand against the window. It feels different, she whispered. Tarek nodded. Or maybe we're the ones who changed. Jonas exhaled a shaky laugh. We crossed galaxies, met the ghosts of a civilization older than our sun, and now we're back to air, noise, gravity. He paused. Feels unreal. The landing was quiet. A skeleton crew of scientists and medics greeted them, expecting a typical exploration report. Instead, they were met with three pairs of eyes that had seen stars die, realities bend, and friends ascend into light. Debriefing stretched for days, then weeks. Questions piled up faster than answers. How do you explain ascension? How do you describe seeing your friends dissolve into cosmic consciousness, peacefully? How do you warn humanity that the universe itself is shifting, slowly crumbling like ancient stone? In the still hours of night, Elara walked alone through the colony's observation dome. Stars glimmered overhead, calm, quiet, pretending nothing was wrong. She knew better. We looked at the stars, she murmured, replaying Samara's last echo in her mind, and realized, they were us all along. Humans weren't special because they were strong. or technologically advanced, or destined for greatness. They were special because they questioned. Because they looked up. Because even in the face of cosmic dread, something inside them still said, "Go further." Elara closed her eyes. She could almost feel her ascended friends out there, moving as light, as thought, as something humanity had no word for yet. Not gone. Just beyond. The universe was vast. Dangerous. Impermanent. But humanity? Humanity was stubborn. Curious. Fearful, yet unstoppable. Tarek approached, standing beside her silently. "Do you think they can hear us?" he asked. Elara smiled faintly. "I think they feel us." Jonas joined them, carrying a datapad filled with their findings. "So, what now?" Elara looked out at the stars, old friends now, not distant strangers. "Now," she said, "we tell the truth. We prepare. And we keep exploring. Because we might be small, but our courage. Our curiosity." She tapped the dome lightly. "It's infinite." The stars shimmered in quiet agreement. And somewhere, in the deep folds of the cosmos, the Ascended watched, waiting for humanity to take its next step into the void.